Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, everybody. Wherever you are in the world and whatever time it is as you tune in, Women Jakar, welcome. I am very excited to see you here this morning. Kate, I see that I managed to save the link in time for you to get here. Rashid, thanks for sending me a message this morning. I appreciate that. Gihan, great to see you, buddy. Haven't seen you in ages. I was flicking through a book of yours just the other day. I love some of your models. G'day Louise, g'day Yoga. Hello, Chris's autopilot. Is Chris also here or just his autopilot? And Shelley, lovely to see you. How are you all? Are you good? You're good, excellent. Today we're going to talk about numbers. Who loves numbers? Hooray for numbers. I know, there is great irony in today's thing because, look, I was actually very good at maths, but I've got to be honest, where business is concerned, I am like many people where I kind of have a tendency to ignore the numbers and hope that when I look at them later, somehow they'll have magically arranged themselves in an order that makes me happy and or is going to pay my bills. And so today, honestly, is a topic that I chose as much for my own benefit as for yours. I figured if you want to learn something, you should teach it, right? And so this is a great excuse for me to make sure I'm on top of my own numbers. But I'm curious, before we get started, I have like some ideas. Don't get me wrong, I haven't come in here completely unprepared hoping that you're just going to teach me. I've done some thinking. And I wonder, like, when I just talk generically, when we just raise generically the idea of numbers in your business, I'm curious, are there numbers that you feel particularly comfortable with? Are there numbers that you feel particularly uncomfortable with? I'm curious, just as a general topic, when we talk about the idea of the numbers in your business, what comes to mind for you specifically? So I don't mind if you want to drop something in the chat box or if you just want to unmute yourself, but I'd love to hear a couple of perspectives on kind of how you think about numbers in your business and maybe the ones you're comfortable with and the ones maybe less so. Anyone want to kick us off? Yeah. Hello, Gihan. How are you, my friend?
Yeah, good. Thanks, Cole. Look, I reckon the numbers that I'm really good with are measuring like things like income generated and so on, and then looking at how they compare to last year. Probably what I'm not so good at, and I don't really focus on, is like what's coming up, like projections,
right, forecasting,
and targets, 2-year forecasts, and going like how many people have I reached out to this week, this month, and so on. Yeah, the numbers that I should be looking at to look at future business.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, that's a really interesting idea. The idea that there's essentially the reflection you can do on the numbers that have been generated in the past and insights you can draw by looking at the past and kind of learning from it. But then there's this whole other thing of what numbers are you going for in the future? What can you be expecting? How can you shift those numbers? Yeah, I love that, Guy. Totally. Anyone else? What comes up for you when we talk numbers? KP and then Louise.
Thank you, Gian, for getting us started, because that really prompted some things that I'm aware of, which is that I can think small number, like approaches, like how many approaches should I be making? Like I can set those kind of near-term goals, but I don't do it in the context of a larger picture of strategy targets beyond that weekly target, to be thinking about. Like I only recently got over my resistance to actually coming up with an overarching number, to really a big dream number. And I come from a freaking environment where people dream around me all the time. And yet I was really resistant to the idea of setting a goal that I didn't feel I could reach. But in saying it out loud, finally, it was really freeing to at least then give me an opportunity to think about the how, but without the what first. And I fought the what for a long time. So I'm good at the little ones. I had a resistance to the big one, and realizing that the big one is really important to get freedom to think about then what is that going to look like to get me there.
Yeah, totally. What the big number that you finally allowed yourself to dream about? What kind of number was it? Was it a sales number? Was it a like what kind of a number was it?
Yeah, you know, Cole, we come from that environment of thought leader business school where it's about black belt.
Yeah,
Black belt being $1 million a year, which I was just like, I literally to the founder of the thought leader business school did everything but this and said, I'm not getting aboard that train. Known for the oppositional defiant disorder. I've been labeled that now. But and then when I was asked to finally pledge to it, it was like,
yeah,
all right, Jesus. And actually, and found out I had a lot to learn about the ability to set the big dream goal and freed up to, right, we're going for it now. What does that mean? But
Yeah,
there's
awesome.
a lot of little numbers in between that I have to now get to.
Yeah, totally. Thanks, KP. That's awesome. Louise, numbers in your business. What do you think? Is there something wrong with your audio? Because you look unmuted, but we can't hear you. I'll come back to you. Anyone else got thoughts about numbers? I need at least one more person because we need to come back to Louise. Numbers in your business. What comes up for you? Shelly, Kate, Yoga, Rashid, Chris. Chris's autopilot. Anyone?
All right, I'll
Yeah,
add.
go for it.
Okay,
Rashid.
so numbers on some level are sort of arbitrary. You know, I
Yeah.
can say, okay, you know, I want to do 30,000, 40,000, 50,000. And it's sort of a concept rather than reality, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, totally.
And this is something that, you know, Barbara says, you know, you're in love with the concept, but what about the reality? What are you actually going to do? And then, you know, when you work it backwards and you say, oh God, you know, I've got to phone how many people and, you know, how many cold calls or how many approaches or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. It is interesting how there's a difference between saying a number and truly believing it or committing to it. And I don't know if you've had that experience, Rashid, when you find a goal, and this kind of taps into what KP was talking about, but there's that interesting experience when you find a goal that actually truly resonates with your because the numbers are all an abstraction, right? It's not actually important to you whether you call 100 people or not. What's important to you is the work that you get to do and whatever. And it's interesting when you manage to find a goal or a target or a number of some sort where as a highly simplified abstraction of reality, suddenly you find it does connect with what you truly believe, or it does massively motivate you. And suddenly you can find that number providing you with the fuel to drive you really effectively. But you're right. And if it doesn't resonate with you and it doesn't tap into your motivations for why you do your work, then they can just be whatever, some random figure that you write on a wall and then ignore.
I have on my bookshelf a book.
Yeah.
I was just looking for it if I could display it, but I never find a book when I'm looking for one. Called Obliquity. Obliquity.
Okay,
which
as
is
in like obliqueness.
Yes, which means it's sort of like Steve Jobs' idea, in that we're not going out there to make $1 billion. We're going out there to make a brilliant product.
Yeah.
That's our focus. The focus is on that. The $1 billion just comes from that.
Yeah, totally.
So it's sort of like that. But then Peter Senge talks about the elastic band idea, that if you stretch out this way and that's your goal, then it'll draw you to it. So there's, you know, there's different opinions on this, and you can get one opinion and a different opposite opinion. But I do like the idea of, you know, Steve Jobs' idea. Just create a brilliant product and go out and sell it.
Totally. And it's funny, I think the number can sometimes be the distraction from what you're trying to do. So in this case, Steve Jobs is saying, we're not trying to make $1 billion. What we're really trying to do is make a brilliant product. And we believe that people will then come and buy it. And at the same time as well, sometimes if you, I don't know if you've had this experience, but if you look directly at what you're trying to do, it seems intractable and you struggle to do it. And if you just turn it into a number that you're trying to get up, so it's like, I'm just going to try and call 100 people. I'm not going to try and get my program off the ground. I'm not going to try and change the world. I'm just going to try and call 100 people. And in some ways, by taking your eyes off directly what you were trying to create, it actually makes it easier to do it. And so I think, funnily enough, sometimes a number can be a distraction from what you're trying to do, but equally it can be a better way of trying to achieve what you want. Louise, how'd you go with your microphone? Are you shit house? Didn't work? No. Okay. You'll just have to communicate either by semaphore or the chat box.
Can I try that?
Oh, yes. Hey,
Oh, there we
it
go. How
worked.
about I take myself unmute? That would work.
That could also help.
So the number that came to my mind first was more about what I charge for a particular client or gig or retainer. So that's where I tend to focus.
Yep.
I think I'm a bit lazy as far as what I want to earn. I don't want to earn $1 million or $500,000.
Yeah.
And that might be more a fear thing of failing. But I kind of tend to spend more time, right, what will this cost?
Yeah.
And put my effort into it.
Yep, totally. And we did a webcast a couple of weeks ago around pricing and how weird it is to price your own stuff and how difficult it is to kind of look at yourself from the outside and try to work out what something should be worth. And yeah, I definitely find that challenging for sure. Awesome. All right. Well, what I thought I'd do is go through some numbers that I think are important in your business and the way that I kind of think about them. And one of the reasons for doing this is one of my kind of fundamental beliefs about how to make your business successful is I think that there are 5 things that you need to be good at in order to grow your business. And that it works a little bit like a mathematical equation where you're multiplying. And if you're a 0 on any of those 5 things, well, then your equation amounts to 0. Like you want to get at least decent at all 5 of these things. Those things are, by the way, prepare, promote, propose, provide, and prod, which basically means get good and then get known and then get booked and then get referrals and then create a big tribe of advocates. But it's like essentially from strangers to prospects to customers to clients to advocates. And are you good at moving people from each of those levels to the next? And if you get good at turning strangers into prospects, that's fantastic. But if you never, ever, ever turn them from prospects into customers, then your business is never going to churn out the number that we're after, a profit. And equally, it doesn't matter how good you are at turning clients into advocates. If you never get a client in the first place, your business is never going to churn out anything. And so what I think is really important is across a suite of different numbers, can you just identify one where you happen to really suck right now? And it may be that if you just change that one number, suddenly your business would be a lot more profitable because you're actually pretty good at most of the other stuff. And so what I'm hoping today is that we can gain some confidence about some things where you go, oh, cool, my number there or there is pretty good, but also potentially see a weakness where you go, oh, wow, yeah, okay, my number there doesn't seem as good as what Cole's suggesting it could or should be for the level that I'm at. Curious, just before we go into, I'm going to share like a table and show you a bunch of numbers. Before we go into it, is there a number that you're presently focused on? Do you have one number that you currently are trying to make go up? And if so, what is it? I'm curious. Does anyone have a number that you're currently actively trying to make go up? Gihan, you've got a number you're trying to make go up. What is it?
Yeah, look, I don't know how specific you want me to be, Cole, but I reckon more bookings in Perth, more work in Perth.
Yeah.
I'm saying, and I'm not sure whether it's number of bookings or maybe total revenue. Probably both those numbers.
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. Perfect. And in Perth, so you don't have to travel. Is that the gist? Yep. Totally. I can understand that. KP, you've got a number you're trying to make go up. What is it?
It is customers in a new market. So I'm trying to change markets, so it's breaking into that.
Yeah, cool. I think it can be quite useful to have a number that you're focused on. Now, many of you will know the guy or know of the guy who wrote this book, The Game Changer by Jason Fox. It's funny, he wrote this book and in doing so fell out of love with the idea and doesn't want to work with people on this topic anymore. He has a PhD in it, but he doesn't like it. I don't know if you've ever had the experience of writing a book as a farewell to to an area of your expertise, but that's what this was for Jace. The poor guy, it's such a great book too. He could make millions of dollars out of this if he wanted to, but he doesn't want to. This book is all about the idea of turning things into games, and Jace shares the kind of obvious when you think of an example, which is like, if you were just trying to be as efficient as possible at golf, you would just pick up the ball and just walk over and put it in the hole. And all the rigmarole around it is actually a complete waste of time, but it's incredibly engaging for people because of the difficulty of it, and people want to try and watch that number go down, and they put an extraordinary amount of time and effort into improving their skills in order to make that number go down. So he talks about the value of turning things into games and how engaging that games can be. And also he talks about the effectiveness of making progress visible. And this is, I think, one of the things that we're not naturally good at when we work alone, is we don't necessarily make progress particularly visible. And numbers can be a really useful way of doing that. And so Chris, in response to that idea of like, don't worry about the number, do the thing you're trying to do, I go, yes. And in the occasions where you can't motivate yourself or it's not working, we can use numbers to make things visible that we can then kind of track more effectively. So at the moment, the number that I'm trying to get to go up is the number of people who are going to come on December the 8th, right? That's the number that's trying to go up. And I've spoken to the majority of you about whether you're free on December the 8th. And on that topic, if you happen to know another person who might be free on December the 8th and wants to be in Melbourne to have an awesome day with folks like this and me, can you please let them know about it and tell them, by all means, I'm happy to chat to them about it. One of the other numbers I'm currently trying to do is see how many people I can meet in a week, and every week trying to make that number bigger. Cool. All right. Let's talk about some specific numbers. My goal is to help people make money meaningfully and freedomfully. And two numbers that I've picked, which I find very motivating for myself, and which I hope will be motivating for you, are the idea that we can work 1,000 hours a year. So 1,000 hours a year works out to about 20 hours a week with 2 months off. So you work 10 months of the year, 20 hours a week, and then you have 2 months where you go and do whatever you like. That to me feels like a fantastic amount of time to spend working. Hands up if 1,000 hours a year, like when I describe it like that, does that feel good to you as a set of as a target? Does that feel good? Great. Okay. That's wonderful. I'm glad that you say that, because I want that to be really inspiring. In fact, Louise, I've heard lots of people say, oh, you know, I don't care about the $1 million a year. I know that money is not the primary motivating factor for lots of people. Do you know how I know that? It's not the primary motivating factor for me either. Freedom is my primary motivating factor in actual fact. The only reason I want money is to buy my own freedom. Once I'm totally free, I don't want money anymore. I'm not motivated by the money. And money does buy freedom, so I am, if that makes sense. So the first number that I'm motivated by is 1,000 hours a year. I love working 20 hours a week. I enjoy the 20 hours a week that I work. I don't actually want to work only 10. I think if I only work 10, I'd probably end up bored. So 1,000 hours a year feels good to me. And the second number is for an average of $500 an hour. And if you do the maths, average $500 an hour, do 1,000 hours a year, comes out to $500,000. That number might be smaller than what motivates you or bigger than what motivates you, but for me, that is a number where I can't imagine I would ever need or want more than 500 grand a year. Now, this is in profit, talking about net profit. I'm not currently making $500,000 a year, and I'm motivated to get that number up. I did yesterday, though, donate $5,000 to Bush Heritage Australia to buy a property in South Australia that amounts to about like 1/10 of the entirety of the land area of South Australia or something like that. one of the reasons I'm motivated to earn $500,000 a year is to give large amounts of it away to organizations like that. So you don't have to want money to spend it on yourself, is what I'm saying. I think there's value if you find that number too big. I think there's value in realizing it's not just about what you get paid. Money is an incredible token of the impact that you're making. Now, I think if you're making $500,000 profit worth of impact in the world as an individual, I think you're providing an amazing service to the world. So grab a pen and draw something, if you wouldn't mind, that looks a little like this. I'm talking about making somewhere up to $500,000 a year in profit. And it makes sense to me to break that into 5 levels, $100,000 each. And we're not going to be too crafty about what we call the levels. They're going to be called level 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. KP mentioned thought leaders, and I think a lot of the people on this call have some experience with thought leaders. There's one major difference, kind of philosophical, fundamental difference between what I want to use a table like this to achieve and what thought leaders wants to use a table like this to achieve, which is, I reckon there's a deal that can be made with the devil around identity and money. And deals with the devil are really attractive because there's always a massive payoff, right? And there's also the devil bit, right? And so I don't think that thought leaders or Taki Moore or anyone else is wrong for making the choice they made, but I want to make a different choice in the community that I want to exist within. The deal with the devil is, if you turn a table like this into a symbol of identity, and the benefit that can come from that, which is substantial and real, right? I am not downplaying that. The benefit that can come from turning this into a symbol of your identity is that identity is one of the most powerful motivators for changing how you act. And if you believe that a particular thing represents your identity, and we are, like, our egos are very strongly tied to our identities and protecting them and whatever. And so if you see yourself as a level 5 person or a black belt in that parlance, right, then that can motivate you to do lots of great work and have a huge impact. And I think it can create lots of psychological not goodness. There are lots of, I think, downsides and negatives to it. One of which is it prevents people from being, it can, given the right conditions, prevent people from being genuine about where they're really at. Because if you say I'm a yellow belt or a blue belt or a black belt, or I'm a level 1 or a level 3 or a level 5 or whatever, the problem is, what about when now you're not again? And how can you be honest about that? So here's what I'm saying to you. I'm not currently at level 5. I have been in the past, but I'm not right now. And so what's really useful for me is being able to come back down and go, okay, cool, well, what do I need to think about now at the level where I am currently at in order to keep myself going? I remember a particular occasion where I went to one of Taki's, so I signed up for Taki Moore's program for a year, which was fantastic. He's one of the best live trainers that has ever walked the earth. He's amazing. And there was a woman in the corner of the room who was talking about being at one of the kind of mid to lower tier belts. I can't remember what she was at exactly, but I remember hearing her voice and seeing her face and thinking, I know her. Who is that? And I worked it out over time. Her name was Dominic Bertolucci. And she had been a black belt in Thought Leaders, but then was in Taki's program and was down here. And I was like, that's kind of weird. Like, why? And I think it's when you make identity the thing, it has effects like this. If you've gotten to black belt and then you fall back down again, well, then now what do you do? Like, it's awkward. So anyway, I just wanted to make the point that this is just whatever your business is doing right now. And next year it might be better or it might be worse. And I want us to all be super honest about it. But basically, The definition of a level 1 business is a business that is doing $100,000 a year. Okay? And a level 2 is 200,000. A level 3 is 300,000. This is obviously not complex. 400 and 500. Now, this is my favorite part about this whole table. Are you ready? I love this. This bit makes me so happy. If you want to make $100,000 a year, I reckon you have to make 10K a month. What? You say? There are 12 months in a year, Cole. I know, but where I'm from, I take 2 of them off. So if you want to make $100,000 in a year, then you have to make $10,000 in a month, because on 2 of the months, you're not going to make anything because you're going to take them off. And you're like, oh, Cole, but I have, some online program that sells itself in my sleep. And I go, great, that's fine. But I love the idea that we don't have to muck around with the fact that 12 doesn't divide into base 10 numbers very well. So it's just 10K a month makes 100K a year. I feel like that's round enough. Hands up if that also makes you happy. Does it make you happy to just ignore that? Yeah, totally. Good. I'm glad. All right. So we're going to go 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 per month. So, Louise, you were talking about how one of the numbers that concerns you most is pricing yourself. And I reckon there's a pretty simple, straightforward kind of way to translate where you're presently at or where you want your business to get to with what you need to charge by either day or hour. And it's super straightforward. If you're charging by the day in thousands, so remember, our $100, $200, $300, $400, $500,000 is your net profit. So that's what you're going to take home after your expenses. Each of us will have slightly different expense percentages. Mine is extraordinarily low. I have one assistant in the Philippines. I have a bookkeeper, an accountant, and a Zoom subscription. Those are my expenses for the year. So my net profit is like 92 or something. For some of us, it might be more like 70 or 75. If it's less than 50, I would ask you what you're doing. Like, how did you get it that low? If you're doing lots of travel or selling things that incorporate other people, I suppose, is where you're going to see that number get hit the most. And so, if you're going to sell your time by the day, I reckon you need to be going for at least $2,000 for a day if you're trying to make $100,000 in net profit for the year. If you're trying to make $200,000 in net profit for the year, then that number's more like 4K. 6, 8, 10 if you want to make 50K in net profit for the year. And you might say, but Cole, like if you're making 10,000 in a day, right? Like, does that mean you only have to sell 5 or 6 days in a month at that rate to make the 500K a year? Well, yeah, you have to sell 6 because you do have to cover your expenses. But yes, and that is kind of how it works. When you're selling your time at a premium, you're not going to be selling every single day of it, especially if you're trying to work 1,000 hours a year. Because I think if you're working 20 hours a week, that is basically one full day where you're out in the world doing some kind of delivery, and then a couple of half days of doing other prep work in order to get that day of delivery is how I think about it. Does that make sense? So I would rarely, if I am doing in-person delivery, which for me is pretty rare, but if I am doing it, it would very rarely happen more than once a week. Now, I do know people who've managed to get themselves very busy and they're like Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, flat out, but I don't want to work that much. And so do you get that it's possible to run a level 3 business at level 2 rates, but not if you're working 1,000 hours a year? And so this is how the numbers relate to each other. So just a quick check-in, based on you knowing what level your business is operating at annually, and then looking at this number that I'm saying is about the number you need to sell your time for on a daily basis, do they match up relatively closely? Are you getting about the number in the third column for a day in order to end up with the number that you make in net profit in the first column across a year. Is hands up if anyone's substantially higher or lower than that number. Anyone way off it? Chris and KP, sort of? You're lower, are you, Chris? So does that just mean you're working a lot? Or that you're not making the number in the first column that you want?
I'm not making the number in the first column.
Yeah, right. Yeah. KP, is yours lower than?
It's when I work at a higher rate. I just don't have enough of those higher rate things. So I feel like, yeah, I can cheerfully say my day rate is good, but I don't get enough.
Yeah, totally. And so what I think can be useful about a table like this is not that it has to, I don't want this thing to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and nothing else can be a fact. Obviously, these numbers are made up, right? And I think it can be useful as a guide to help you think about, well, if I am going to progress to the next level, like where do my numbers vary substantially? And how can I change or improve things? And so, like, I think it is a mistake, and KP, I'm not saying that it's a mistake in your case, but it is a mistake to try to charge a level 5 day rate if you're currently at level 1 or 2, because you probably don't have the reputation, you probably don't have the profile that's going to justify that, and it's not going to create the conditions that will allow your business to grow. I think in general, the numbers that are on the level, you want to make sure you're charging at minimum per day the number on the level where your business is at on an annual basis. And what you want to do is try to push yourself, like try to get more sales if you can at the next one up. Hands up if you've read The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. You ever read that? The whole book is a treatise on what I think is a blatantly obvious but also kind of obscure idea, which is that the only place and time that ever exists is right now. Now is the only time that anything ever happens. And if you want the future to be different, the only time that you can change the future is right now. And so if you want your future business to rise a level in terms of your net profit for a whole year, well, the only time that you can affect that is right now. And so if you're currently selling your days at about $4,000, but you want to get to a level 3 business, well, then what you need to do is start selling $6,000 days now. And if we can do that for a whole year, well, at the end of that year, we'll have found we've jumped from a level 2 to a level 3. That makes sense? Awesome. So the other way that we can think about our time is by the hour. And again, super simple numbers. If you're going to work 1,000 hours a year, then on average, when you're selling an hour, this is what it needs to cost. Now, the danger of this number is that you sell your time directly for this number, as in when someone rings you and says, what do you cost? You say $100 an hour. You probably, like if you look at the price for a day and then the dollar an hour, that obviously doesn't work, right? Because you work a bunch of hours that you don't actually sell. But in general, what I think this number is particularly useful for is for you to think about what is your time actually worth. So I don't know about you, but I am a penny pincher. Hands up if you could be described as a tight ass. Are you a tight ass? Anyone? Yeah, maybe. Perfect. Doesn't matter how much money I make, I remain a tight ass. And I am one of those people who thinks, why would I pay someone to do that, that, or that? I can do that myself. And I'm one of those people who will waste a substantial part of my afternoon because I found some great deal on Facebook Marketplace, but it's 27 kilometers that way. And it would have been cheaper for me in real terms, honestly, to actually just buy it. But the little guy in my head doesn't actually believe that I'm worth $500 an hour. That's the truth of it. And what I have to realize is I am worth $500 an hour. And I do need to think about my time being worth that much. And so I find this column as useful, not just for what do I need to sell my time for, because what do you need to sell it for is actually about double this, right? Roughly. But I find it really useful of being like, what's my time worth? Is it worth saving $27 off the retail price of that JBL battery powered speaker, hypothetically? Or should I just order it online and get it delivered? Okay, quick check-in. Numbers so far, they feeling okay? Have any of them leapt out at you as being like, oh no, that's crazy? No. Good. So all those numbers that we've done so far, they're all money. Money per year, money per month, money per day, money per hour. Let's now branch out into some other things. And I think a really interesting one to look at is list. So list is the number of people who've moved from stranger to prospect in your world. I reckon someone becomes a genuine prospect, someone who you genuinely could prospectively work with, if you know enough about them to put them in your CRM. And that could just be their email address, which I have said before and will say again, is still, in this day and age, the most valuable thing you can know about a person. And so, based partly on what I think you kind of should have, but also based partly on canvassing people who I know who've run level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 businesses over the last long time, this is the number of people that I think tends to be on a list to get a person to that level. And level 1 is super low and entry level. I reckon you need 100 people to make $100,000 in profit a year. Just 100. And the reason I think that is, if you only know 100 people and you're working 1,000 hours a year, you can devote 10 hours to each of them. You can afford to invest quite a lot of time and effort and attention and care into all the people who you could potentially work with. You can afford to invest, because if we're going with the idea that half your time is paid and half your time is not directly, then in a sense, you can afford to invest 5 hours into looking after those 100 people. 5 hours each, unpaid. And if you invest that much, imagine if you invested, just imagine, 5 hours into a random person who is a good fit for you. Imagine if you put 5 hours into caring for that person and looking after them, how likely it would be that they would make a purchase from you. Because you would either seem like a stalker or the most generous person on earth. And generosity is often reciprocated. So I reckon if you want to make $100,000 a year, you only need a list of 100 people. And what we want to learn from this is that it is our goal and responsibility to look after those people. How much did you pay to come on this webinar? Nothing. It's a gift. And it is a gift. I'm not going to force you to sign up for a thing that I do. But this is me showing care and attention and empathy in the hopes that that will be reciprocated. And I think it will. I know some of you are coming on December the 8th. I hope that some of you will sign up for the big exciting thing that I'm about to announce for next year. So you only need 100 people to make $100,000, I reckon. Next up, and again, these numbers are made up, okay, but they're useful. I reckon level 2 businesses tend to have about 1,000 people on the list. Once you've got 1,000 people on your list, you're obviously not putting in as much time on an individual basis. And we start to move more to that model where we're using our list and using various tools and processes to qualify prospective clients to make sure that we're investing our time in the ones who are most likely to become a long-term client. I reckon once you've grown your list to about 2,500, tends to get you to level 3. Somewhere in the range of 5,000 is generally where people are at around level 4. And for the types of work that I typically am helping people do, I don't think anyone needs a list bigger than 10,000, to be honest. Now, obviously, I know lots of people who have lists bigger than that. Lisa O'Neill has an email list of like 40,000, but she makes her money selling people $50 things. The majority of us here sell things priced more like the day number in this thing. $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, $6,000, $10,000 a day. When you're selling yourself in chunks like that, I don't think you ever need a list of more than 10,000. So again, quick check-in. If you look at where your business is on the annual basis, and then you look at the numbers that I've just shared for list, are you substantially ahead of or behind or about on? Like, are you near to it? No? Lower? Lower. Cool. And there are people who run incredibly profitable businesses with quite small lists. Like, if you know 100 CEOs and you're really good at serving them, you don't ever need a list of 101. You're fine. And so I don't wish to kind of put an unuseful number in your head that you have to try to chase. But if your list was, let's say, twice as big as it presently is, if you woke up tomorrow and your list had just expanded by double and it hadn't changed in quality, so it wasn't substantially worse in terms of the individuals on it and their, the degree to which they fit you and your business, but it also wasn't substantially better, but it just doubled in size, how much easier would the numbers in your business play out? KP, there's a skeptical shake of the head there. What's that talking about?
Well, I guess I feel like what you're asking is if you have an unengaged list, doubling it isn't going to make, you just have to, then your work is doubled to try to engage the passive people on your list. So is that kind of, are we going in the right direction there? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, definitely. And also just, if you currently have a list of 500 people and every time you send something out, you get X amount of response. If you doubled the number of people on your list, in a sense, that should make everything half as difficult. There is definitely a benefit to being connected to more people. And what I'm saying is, on the path towards level 5, most people who I see succeeding on that journey, at some point, their one number is people on list. So I've worked with Peter Cook for a very long time. And I know that in the very early days where I was helping him, I had just got a master's degree in marketing. He had just made his big decision to blow up his old business and launch a completely new one. And the game we played for 6 months was, how many people can we get on the list? And that was the only number that we spoke about for 6 months. It went up by a lot in that time because everything we were doing was invested into making that number go up. And Chris, in the same way that building amazing products is one way for Apple to make $1 billion, I reckon one way for all of us to make $100,000 more in net profit next year than this is to have more people on your list. So don't worry about the profit, just worry about the people.
Cole, can I just jump in?
Yeah, sure.
I'm just keen to understand what qualifies someone to be on your list. I'm assuming this is like someone who's put their name forward to subscribe to your newsletter, for example.
That is one example.
Yeah. What else? Like, or is this just, because I know lots of people, and a lot of people know what I do, but they're not, they haven't actually said, yes, here's my email,
right.
Please read.
So I do a thing, well, Gino does it really, but I do a thing on LinkedIn where if someone reacts to a piece of content which was specifically related to one of my fields of expertise, but so at the moment, obviously I'm going very hard on the idea of being a solo pro, and I'm putting a lot of content like that out. If somebody leaves a comment and says, oh, this is a really cool idea, thank you, then I will private message them on LinkedIn that says, hey, awesome, thanks so much. I write a newsletter about this pretty much every week. there's 3 times as many good things on that as they put on LinkedIn. Would you like me to add you to that? Is this the correct email address? Half of them say yes. So I get like 20 to 30 new subscribers to my list every week just by sending that message, because my email subscriber list is one of the numbers that I'm really focused on growing right now, because I neglected it badly for a long time. Right? And so do you see how caring about that number, making that number a game, right, has caused Gino and I to come up with just this little thing that we can do. Takes him 8 minutes a day, right? And what he does is, before he sends it, he sends me the person's name. He said, he sends me a list on our Discord chat every day that says, here are the names of the people that I'm planning on sending the message to. And I look at those names and I'll go, oh, that one's my cousin. I wouldn't send them that message. That would be weird. I'll write to them. Or I've worked with that person before. Don't send the generic message. I want to say something specific to them. And so I'm making sure that I'm doing it in a way that's not, feeling like it's overly automated or spammy. In fact, 10%, no, less than that, 5% of the people that get that message write back to me and say, Cole, this is amazing. Is this automated or did you do this? Right, because they're obviously people like us, right? And so they know that there's a game here. And I write back to them and I say, well, look, depends what you consider automation. Gino pressed send on the message, but he sent me your name first and asked for permission to send it. And if I would say anything different from what I usually say, and I gave him permission to send it. And this is now obviously me replying to you. Do you know what I mean? And so it's like, I feel like I've found a space where I don't feel icky about doing it. It is a game to get people on my list. I am doing it in some ways cynically because I'm trying to make more money, but I also feel good about it. It starts lots of interesting conversations, but it makes the number go up. And so, Shelley, you might know 500 people who should be subscribed to your email list and they're not yet. What's a little thing you could do that would make them go from over here, not subscribed, to boink, just jump over that tiny little barrier of agreeing to trade an email address with you and permission for you to send them some stuff. Make that number go up.
Yeah, that's really useful. Really useful. Thanks, Cole. And can I just say, I've been on the other end of your process and it wasn't icky at all.
Yeah,
it worked.
Exactly. And if it was, that would have been the end of it.
Yeah, I wouldn't have
been. You know what I mean? Like, the people who have said to me, this seems like it could be automated, I always write to them, right? I always write back to them and I go, well, look, Gino sent it, but I wrote it and he asked me if I should send it, if we wanted to send it to you specifically, and I specifically said yes. Does that make you, I've literally said, does that make you feel icky or used in any way? And everyone writes back, no, man, you're cool. I just thought I thought it looked really effective and I was just wondering how you did it. Okay, cool. That's how I did it. Oh, awesome. And so, yeah, thank you, Shelley, for confirming that it still isn't icky. That makes me feel good. All right. This one's an interesting one. As your business grows through the levels, it's pretty natural for the amount of outbound to inbound activity to shift, if that makes sense. So do you get that Adam Grant or Brene Brown, who are the 2 names that I just pick whenever I want to talk about the most well-positioned you can possibly be, do you get that they're probably not doing a lot of outbound activity? When you're Adam Grant, you probably don't need to ring people that often to get work. I don't think. I think he's doing all right. And so what I think is useful is kind of having a sense of what your outbound to inbound activity might look like in order to make your practice or business perform at that level. So, whoops, that is the wrong button. At level 1, I reckon whether you are exactly at this or not, you should think of yourself as being 100% outbound. If you're going to make $100,000 a year, it's because you are going out to the market and offering to work with people. And so for someone who is at $70,000 a year or something like that, almost always the piece of advice I'm offering to get them going is to get more active. And if you're getting any inbound inquiries, we should be able to get you over $100,000 a year pretty darn easily. And the way to do that is to do a lot more outbound inquiring first That will create the impact, that will create the flow-on effect. We can then prod those people who've become advocates, and we will get more inbound inquiries from there. But if you are below 100 grand in net profit a year, I reckon your focus should be here. What do I need to do to get active in the outbound sense? How can I reach out to people and say, I'm not going to wait, I want to work with you? When you jump to level 2, life gets a little easier, and you're at about 75-25. Now I'm going to coach myself here in public, because in an annual sense, I'm currently running at about level 2. Okay, bit more. But I'm allowing myself to sit at about a 50-50 outbound inbound at the moment. And so this is a wake-up call for me in terms of, if I want to actually push my business to the next level, I actually need to get slightly more active outbound, because I'm letting myself tick along at 50-50 because it's comfortable. I'm doing a bit of outbound, but I'm allowing quite a little of inbound as well. And I'm not really pushing the outbound harder than the inbound. And so this column to me is a wake-up call where I'm like, actually, if I'm genuinely serious about wanting to lock into level 3 again and then start to push for level 4, right now what I need to be doing is more outbound. Does that make sense? So again, these numbers don't have to be the truth. I made them up. I made them up based on a lot of experience. But if these numbers don't match up to your present experience, what I want you to do before you reject them is go, ooh, is this telling me something? By the time you're at level 4, I reckon it's about 25-75. So 75% of your work will be coming from inbound inquiries, and you should still be actively seeking out the people that you want to work with for about a quarter of what you're doing. And when you get to level 5, it is a lot more comfortable, but I don't think you ever want to get to 0 and 100. Oops. I don't think you should ever drop below 5 and 95. And the reason is, if you drop to 0 and 100, you're just allowing the universe to decide for you what you do. And I think you always want to maintain a degree of agency and control over who you work with and what you're working on. And so 5% of your work should be you actively choosing people, and you're like, that is the organization I want to work with. That is the person I want to work with. That is the work I want to do. I'm going to reach out to them and I'm going to make it happen. I think you should still be doing that 5% of the time, even when your business is absolutely rocking. So I'm taking a personal wake-up call out of this column. Is anyone else seeing something useful there? Yep. Might do something different as a result, maybe. All right, so this next column is Peter Cook's favorite column, and he's really proud because he made me change one of the numbers, and I will reveal that one when we get there. But anytime Peter Cook tells you something about sales, you should listen, because he's the best salesperson I have ever met, bar none. But this column now is the percentage of your sales meetings that result in a sale, right? So the percentage of the people who you meet, and there's an explicit, yep, I'll tell you about my thing, you can decide whether you want to buy it. And I reckon at level 1, it's at about 25%. Generally speaking, 25% of the people you offer it to will say yes. And if you say, oh, well, actually, I'm at level 1, but I'm at 90%, I go, yeah, you're not having anywhere near enough sales meetings. Do you get that some days, in some ways, you can improve your performance by making your numbers get worse, not better? Isn't that weird? If what we're trying to do is maximize your profit, there are some numbers that we actually want to make worse, not better. The inbound outbound one is the same. I should be happy I'm at 50-50 inbound outbound, shouldn't I? It's easier. No, I'd make more money if I push my outbound up. If I made the ratio worse And it's the same with sales conversions. So I reckon if your number is higher than the number I'm putting for the level that you're presently at, I reckon it's because you're not having as many meetings as you could. You're not offering it to as many people as you could. So I reckon we go basically 25%, 33%, 50%, 66%, and finally 75% up the top. Pete changed that number. I allowed it to get to 90. And he said, no, if you're at 90, you're too cheap. So, what I'd like you to do is think about the performance of your business and look at all these numbers that I have somewhat arbitrarily, but using a lot of experience placed on these. And I want you to look for the one where you see the biggest variance between your present reality and the numbers that I've placed on this table. And in the chat box, can you just put which category it is? So it might be, you know, price per day. It could be the inbound outbound percentage. It could be your sales conversion. It could be your list size. It could be your own perceived value per hour. But which is the one where you see the largest variance between what I'm reckoning are kind of roughly the numbers we could or should be expecting compared to what you would actually see in your business? Inbound, outbound for KP, list size for Shelley. Where do you think is the biggest variance? Conversion percentage for Gihan, which way, mate? Are you getting less conversion or more conversion? Less conversion, right. So, my hypothesis is that if you want the net profit per year to go up, right? If you want to get from level 1 to level 2 or level 2 to level 3, there's a good chance, unless I talk to you personally and we do a lot of investigation, I can only say this with some degree of confidence, but there's a good chance the single thing that you could do will have the biggest impact in getting you from the level you're at to the next one is to change the thing that you just wrote in the chat box as effectively as you possibly can and to improve that number or make it closer, whether it's an improvement or in fact a worsening, but make it closer to the numbers that I put in the table. Because I reckon if you match those numbers, that's what's going to create the growth to get you to the next level. That makes sense? Awesome. So we're at time, but before we go, I'd love to hear, based on this, have you got an idea that you might pursue? Have you got a number that, like some of you might say, well, that's it. I've decided I'm going to try and add 100 people to my list over the course of the next 2 weeks. That could be a decision that you've made. But I'm wondering, has this discussion given you any ideas, whether directly or indirectly, about what you might now try to put into practice to improve your business? I'd love to hear, from everyone if you want, but I'd love to hear from at least a few people. What do you think you might now go to work on as a result of this discussion? Thoughts? Yeah, KP?
As I mentioned, just trying to clarify who I'm selling to. So there's a bit of back work to be done in terms of how I position myself differently to build the right list, to get better and to have people to outbound to. So it's a bit of that progression, I think.
Totally. And it can be a challenge. I think entering a new market is the hardest move to make. It can also be the most rewarding when you find the right market. And it can definitely be done, like Lisa O'Neill was a fashion editor. And at some point she said, I can't remember who she said it to, but she said to someone, I'm about to swear, by the way. She said to someone, because I'm about to quote Lisa and every Lisa quote has a swear word in it. She said to someone, I really like working with high performers who are a bit fucked up. And whoever she was talking with was like, oh, real estate. and And then so she went, KP, on a specific like exercise to get into real estate. And yeah, as I say, that's a completely achievable thing. When you know that there's a good resonance with the market, you can actively seek them out. But yeah, I know how good your stuff is, KP, and I think it's always frustrated me a bit that you haven't seemed to find the people with who it resonates and has the most value. And I'd love it if you were able to make that happen. So yeah, all the best with that. Anyone else? What are you thinking you might work on as a result of this? Yeah, Louise.
Yeah, good.
Sorry, Louise first, then Rashid.
I don't enjoy newsletters, but I've decided today I'm going to have to do a newsletter. It's the only way to I do a lot of stuff online, but
yeah,
it's not converting. So I'm going to try a newsletter, and that might grow my my numbers. I mean, I'm literally 0 on my list. It's scattered. I need to actually build it and pull it to what I do have. And I think a newsletter is one way to increase.
All right. Can I offer you one piece? Is it okay if I give you just a piece of advice around that? The very way that you said that, like, I think I have to, like I should, right? There's a lot of shoulding on yourself. I agree in a strategic sense. Like strategically, yeah, you definitely want a list, and you definitely want, if you can, an engaged list like KP is talking about. And you should have one, and you have to have one. And if it becomes a chore that you hate doing, it's not going to help you, right? So what I would love to encourage you to do is go, you know what? I don't like doing newsletters in the way normal people do them, because I've tried that before and it didn't jazz me. But I do know that strategically it's extremely valuable to have a group of people who open your emails with some level of regularity. I wonder if I could, so rather than telling yourself, I'm going to make a newsletter, can you ask yourself instead to play a different game? Like, I'm going to see if I can get 30 people a week to open an email from me. I'm going to see if I can get 100 people a week to open an email from me. I'm going to see if whatever. You just talked about the fact that you do stuff on socials. Okay, great. What happens if you just grab all your social stuff and stick it into a newsletter? Like, what happens if you just grab the video and the post and the whatever, and you just collate it all into a, here's my week. Like, it doesn't have to be, I sit down and type out a blog and then I give it a fancy title and then I send it. Like, it sounds like that's not going to jazz you up. And I don't ever want to give you a piece of advice that causes you to do something that costs you energy. Like, you've probably gathered by now, my entire theory about running a business like this is that everything you do has to give you energy. And so I love the strategic realization. And now my request, my deep hope for you is that you find a game to play that achieves that strategic end, but which you enjoy playing. Because if it isn't a game, you won't play for long. And so I want you to have fun with it. Is that okay? Wonderful. Rashid.
Yeah, for me, it's getting more people on the list again. And what I've done is actually every time somebody likes something, I actually send them a message and connect, and that's starting to work.
Yep.
But the other thing that I've been really hesitant about is putting out offers. And that's something that I really, mentally have to change, because there's this whole thing of, no one wants to be pitch slapped, if you know.
Yeah, totally.
So how do I, that's what I'm sort of saying. Okay, no, I've got stuff of value. I just say, hey, listen, this is what I do.
Yeah, totally.
You want it? You don't want it.
I have something similar to that, I think. I actually have no trouble offering stuff to people once I'm talking to them. So if any of you said, oh, Cole, can we chat next week? And then we started chatting and we were talking about a problem you had and I felt that I could help you solve it, I would have no trouble being like, look, why don't we do a mentoring thing and I'll help you do X, Y, and Z. So that type of offer I'm fine with. I suck at just telling people what I have for sale. If you look at my website, it doesn't say. It's so stupid. So one of the things that I need to do is have my website just tell you, here's what you can buy. Got to do it. And yeah, I agree with Chris, Rashid, your LinkedIn presence is extremely good. Does anyone else have something that they're just bursting to share before we all run off and live our individual lives? What are you gonna work on or think about as a result of this call? Gihan and Shelley.
I got a huge value from this call, and I think specific. Look, I don't have one individual thing, but I really love the model, and it seems to be a useful dashboard for aiming in each of the areas. And I think it's I like the detail that you put in there. And like you said, the numbers are made up, but it doesn't matter because it's worth working towards one set of numbers.
Yeah, totally. Awesome.
And also they're made up, but I'm sure there's been a lot of thought behind them too.
There has been. Yeah, they're made up, but they're useful.
Yeah.
Also, Gihan, I know you're trying to get more work in Perth, but should you ever find yourself in Melbourne, and especially if you're in Melbourne and speaking, I really want to come. So if you're in Melbourne or coming to Melbourne, can you please message me? Because I'd love to see you in person, but if I got to see you in person and see you speak, that would be even better. So just planting that seed of the idea, please, sir. Shelley, what are you thinking? What are you going to work on?
Yeah, for me, a couple of things, obviously building my list, but also taking care of those currently on my list because I haven't been particularly.
Yep.
I also like, the conversation you made with Louise around not have it be a chore. For me, I've done Kim's course recently and I'm really enjoying being in the video space. So now I'm thinking actually maybe I just, so I'm probably going to do my newsletter that way, which is
perfect.
Which is all good. Perfect. But can I say the other thing that is a little aside, but the other random thing that has sat with me throughout this is, for me, it's like looking at the numbers has been really useful, but it's also something about the feeling behind my numbers. Like I am at the lower level here, well, something between 1 and 2. And what I'm realizing is, I recently moved out of being employed to set up my own practice, but actually I have been pulled back to do quite a bit of my income at the moment is contracting back to my previous employer. And actually the feel behind the numbers in my practice, that brings me joy, the feel behind my other numbers, the numbers that are quite similar, but there's something about the weight of what's attached to those numbers.
Yeah. Numbers don't always convey the quality, like quantifying something doesn't always convey the qualitative truth or reality of it. And absolutely, numbers are only signposts towards what we actually want. And yeah, I've given things away for free that were much more meaningful and valuable to me than things that someone paid me $10,000 to do. And yeah, not every dollar is the same, is it? Not every hour spent is the same. Not every client served is the same.
And yes, I guess I kind of was thinking that on a numbers basis, it was a good option for me at the moment, but I'm realizing it maybe not. Anyway, it's kind of outside of this, but I appreciate the great conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Lovely to see you all. Thanks for coming along, and I'll catch you again very soon.